Welcome to the latest episode of The Blueprint, a series where we go beyond the headlines to uncover the thinking, values, and vision of the people shaping our country and our world. At Rockefeller Capital Management, innovation has been part of our DNA since the days of John D. Rockefeller. Today, that spirit lives on in a community of extraordinary leaders. Through these conversations, we bring you rare insider perspectives from some of the most influential minds in business, what drives them, how they lead, and how they manage the opportunities and responsibilities that come with success. Today, we're joined by Ralph Schlosstein, a rare leader who's helped shape not one, but two of Wall Street's most influential firms. He co-founded BlackRock in 1988, he and Larry Fink, the first two, and served as its president for nearly 2 decades. Then he led Evercore, one of the world's top independent investment banks, through a period of remarkable growth as chief executive officer. And before all that, Ralph had a distinguished career in public service, serving under President Carter. His journey blends policy insight, market expertise, and a deep commitment to building enduring institutions. Welcome, Ralph. Thrilled to have you here.
Great to be here.
So I want to jump right in. There's so many things we can talk about because you've had such an incredible career in the financial world with very different businesses and also in the public sector. So we have a lot to cover. But I want to start with this remarkable career that you've had leading some of the legendary firms on Wall Street, serving in the White House, very different spaces. Any values or operating principles remain constant across all these different roles that you've had?
I'd say, first of all, you want to be associated with the highest integrity, highest quality, highest values people. And I've been incredibly fortunate. When I was on the staff of the Joint Economic Committee, the staff director was this incredible man. In the White House, I worked.
And who was that?
John Stark.
Okay.
I worked for Stu Eisenstadt, who went on to be Deputy Treasury Secretary, Deputy Secretary of State, and an incredibly principled human being. Then I founded BlackRock. I worked at Lehman for a while. That was a little bit off the beaten path.
We'll leave that. Got plenty to talk about.
There's lots of really talented people, but a dysfunctional firm. Then in 1988, Larry Fink and I co-founded BlackRock. As you know very well, since you were our banker, we're slightly different personality-wise, but our values, the importance of family, the importance of integrity, the importance of treating everybody respectfully, were very common.
And it was you and Larry and only 3 other people. There were 5.
No, there's 6 of us, 6 other people, 4 from First Boston, where Larry was very senior, and 2 from Lehman, where I ran the financial institutions and structured finance group.
So 6 of you, we'll get to BlackRock, but 6 of you started in 1988 from scratch. And now it's
First day, it was 2 guys in a room with an idea.
Just the 2 of you?
Just the 2 of us. And then we quickly realized that we were going nowhere without the other 6.
Help.
So by Monday, we had 2 others, and by the following Friday, there were 8 of us.
It's amazing. What a story. I mean, it's a $160 billion company now or something like that.
Yes, and $12 trillion under management.
Well, let's go on to the next leg of the journey, which actually, leaving BlackRock after all those years and all that success and moving on to a completely different business is one of the things I admire you most for as a leader, because the business that you went to run is a business I'm familiar with. I have been an investment banker for a long time, a very difficult business to manage from a people standpoint. And you had incredible success there as well. So let's talk a little bit about Evercore.
I went to Evercore in May of 2009 after the financial crisis, kind of still in the middle of the financial crisis. At that time, Evercore had $180 million of advisory revenues. And I joked at that time that I was an endangered species because I was an untainted financial services executive.
Yeah, there weren't many.
And there were not many around. And so I got opportunities to run big banks.
2 of 8 of them are in this interview.
Exactly. And I had opportunities, as I'm sure you did, to run banks, insurance companies, firms much bigger than BlackRock. And I ultimately developed a hypothesis that in the post-financial crisis world, maybe you could take one of these boutiques that had a little bit of scale, and as I said, we had $180 million of revenue, and break out of boutiquedom and become the 3rd and hopefully most elite global independent firm. At that time, Lazard and Rothschild having been in business for 160 and 200 years, had $1.2 billion of revenue. So each.
Yes.
So 7 times Evercore. So I accept the job, I get up in front of the partners, first meeting, they look at me like, why the heck did you leave BlackRock for this little firm? And I give them my thesis, and I could see them all walking over to the water cooler afterward and saying, this guy's really crazy. How are we going to close the gap between Lazard and Rothschild of 180 million and $1.2 billion? Well, we put one foot in front of the other, and over the 13 years I was CEO, we went from 180 million to 2.7 billion in advisory revenues. And we went from...
Where were they?
Well, they're all behind us now. And so in 2012, 2013, we passed Barclays, Deutsche Bank, UBS, and Credit Suisse. In 2016, we passed Citi. This is all in advisory revenues. In 2018, we passed B of A, Lazard, and Rothschild. So since 2018, we've been number 4. And I'm sorry to say this to you, Greg, in 2024 and 25, we've passed Morgan Stanley.
That's incredible.
So we have number 3 in the world behind Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan.
That's really an incredible story. So you gave a little bit of this, but because I don't want to get off this yet, it's just such an unbelievable set of facts and leadership. That was kind of your macro vision. You literally in your first speech tell them we're going to be top 3 independent, even though they're 5-6 times bigger. How does it unfold from there, though? Because the skepticism, I had some of it here. Like when we bought Rock & Co., I did an interview before we closed. We created Rockefeller Capital Management out of Rock & Co., and there were 18 billion in assets. And I said in the interview with Barron's that we were going to be 100 billion in client assets within 5 years. And everybody who read it or talked to me was there was the same reaction. What planet is this guy on? Because the Rock & Co. hadn't grown in years. So you had that reaction in the room. They all went over. And investment bankers, quite skeptical group. How did it start to unfold, this story?
Well, I suspect you've done something somewhat similar here. It's about talent. You have to attract the very best talent. And, when I joined Evercore, there were 35 senior managing directors in advisory. When I left, there were 130. Productivity when I joined was about $7 million per partner. My last year in 2021, it was $25 million per partner.
Clever.
So what I don't talk about is 2 things. One I do talk a lot about. I talk a lot about the fact that when I joined, 3 of the 35 partners were internally promoted. When I left, half of the 130 partners were internally promoted.
So you grew a lot of this.
So we became a talent development machine. We actually hired a woman named Liz Lynch who had run human capital at Morgan Stanley, retired, had her own executive coaching firm, and I miraculously, convinced her to join the mission. And we basically became a hire, train, develop, mentor, and promote your own talent. So that was important. The thing is, I never talk about publicly is, we went from 35 to 130. During that period of time, I asked 65 partners to leave. 20 of them were mistakes I inherited. 45 were mistakes I was part of. And why did we do that? I always said, what does it take to be a great Evercore advisory partner? Highest integrity, inarguably A+ or A at whatever you profess to be good at, and no jerks. And the highest integrity is obvious because we had a very premium firm. A+ or A and no jerks was fundamental to what I was trying to do, which was when I joined, that advisory investment banking is a team sport. When I joined the firm, 35% of our revenues had 2 or more partners working on it. When I left, over 90% had 2 or more partners, over 60 had 3 or more partners, and over 50 had 4 or more partners. And so if you want people to collaborate, 2 things have to be true. You have to have no jerks, because nobody likes to bring a jerk in to work with them. And you have to have A+ and A, because if somebody's an A+ or an A and you're asking them to bring a B to their client, it doesn't work.
It's listening to you, and you did come and speak to my board and talked about your impressions of Rockefeller, because you know our firm very well. We are so aligned in terms of the culture and what we're trying to do. We talk a lot about excellence in everything, but in a collaborative, collegial environment. If you're offensive, no matter how good you are, you can't be here. We don't want them. We now have 1,600 people. We started with 182, and most of them are gone. And Jack Brennan, my lead director, who you know well, he talks about Rockefeller 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. You did Evercore 2.0, 3.0. There's some people you bring in that just aren't, it's not going to work, some of the time. And you just have to keep working to ensure that the principles are implemented 100% of the time. There are no exceptions on the jerk rule. And if somebody's not fitting or there's somebody who can do the job better, you've got to be willing to make that change.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think our businesses are very similar. And I always used to say that our goal was to create a club that the very best people in our business wanted to be a part of. What I said in 2009 that everybody laughed at me is we're going to create the third and most elite. And measure of eliteness is what do your clients pay you that per person.
Yeah. So let's talk about, before we move on to broader topics, but before we get off Evercore, and you can rope BlackRock into this as well. They're incredible stories, and you were an incredible influence in both places. Evercore we just walked through, but BlackRock as well, from scratch to everything. A lot of the lessons were just embedded in Evercore, and a lot of the BlackRock time was similar, because I know it so well with you. What would you do differently as a leader in either or both situations with the benefit of hindsight now?
Yeah, well, I think probably the single thing that neither Larry nor I realized when we started the firm was how incredibly important culture was from day one. And of course now, after 3 or 4 or 5 years, all we talked about was culture. Same thing at Evercore. But the first few years, we were scrapping to survive.
Same thing here. And over the course of my career, I always thought culture was important, and you wanted to have, a set of principles that the best people wanted to sign up to. But as I got older and as I moved into the tenure here, it becomes everything, because that's how you attract those great people. Absolutely. And that's why they stay.
So the very first day, Larry and I, what brought us together.
Day one, 1988. When did you start?
So we started in March 3rd, 1988.
Oh, this started March 1, 2018.
That's a great time to start a business, obviously. So the two of us are sitting in a room at Blackstone, sharing an office. They were our lead investor. And Larry and I had a common malady. We'd both get into the office at 6:30. So we
still true. I mean, you're still at it, and you can still get him at 6:30.
Yep. And so we read the papers, talked a little bit. At 8 o'clock, we called the 20 or 30 people we thought we'd each want to call. We were pretty much done by 10. They all said the same thing. That's great. Good luck. Not a whole lot of encouragement. And so that's when we decided we needed these 6 other people, or other guys who were never going to get out of first gear. So anyway, we hired these young people. They were all 26 to 30. I was 37. Larry was 35. And after about 2 weeks, they come to us and say, we all want to be paid the same for the first 3 years. And by the way...
And some of these people are still quite well known. It's Rob Capito.
Yeah, Rob Capito. And if you looked at their compensation in 1987 at First Boston and Lehman, the low was $300,000, the high was $1.1 million. So this was a big disparity. Yeah. And Larry and I, of course, said, we thought we were really good managers. So, how can you run a firm? How can we start this firm without having the ability to pay bonuses at the end of the year? So we went back and forth for probably 6 weeks, and they were so adamant. Larry and I agreed. So the first 3 years, they were all paid the same. And that set the tone for the firm. And so for the first 3 years, all they focused on was the size of the pie, not their share of the pie. And they actually renewed that for 2 more years. And at the end of 5 years, all we talked about was culture. But they were responsible to a certain extent, and they deserve credit for creating that we, not I culture.
That's, particularly given their age at the time, it's remarkable. And because BlackRock kept that forever. And, and one of the things I say about BlackRock, I just rejoined the board, as you know, and I was on the board. I left in 2009 when I left Merrill. So, I rejoined 16 years later. The sense of it's ours is still there.
Yep.
Big public company. And it's so important. We talk about that here all the time. I call it an enterprise-wide mindset, the people who are focused on the collective good, not just the individual. I mean, you started that with the 6 people, and now you BlackRock's got a firm with 22,000 people, and yet I think it still exists from everything that I can tell.
Great culture for a large firm.
Yeah.
And, and look, Larry is a truly unique leader. It's going to be a real challenge to find someone or some group of people who can succeed him because he is that unique in his talent.
No question. Let's shift to macro, because
Board member, you got a group.
and I was trying to get off that before you pointed that out. I just rejoined, so I got to get my feet wet again. But we both agree that it's, he's a
unicorn.
A unicorn. He's a once in a generation leader. But you did this as well. I mean, the two of you, the focus on excellence and the intensity around that purpose, I have never seen a debate in either one of you, which is, that's just not true very often, particularly with the degree of success. Larry still has no coast, and you never had any coast in you where it's like, okay, I just have the tailwinds and I'm going to enjoy it.
Well, I think probably we both benefited from the fact in being born in lower middle class
All 3 of us.
families.
Yes.
It makes you hungry. I had a dinner a while back with a bunch of friends, some of whom were fairly famous. And at one point, one of the people at the table banged her glass and said, I want to go around the table and have everybody talk about their childhood home. And there were 14 of us at this dinner, and 10 of them came from nothing. Mm-hmm. And I called one of the participants the next day and I said, the really sad thing is our children will never go to a dinner like that.
That it is. It's harder. I mean, it's really, and we've both, I think we've worked hard at the children being, great members of society and having work ethics, but it's a lot easier when there's not a lot there. And I always say, my father was a teacher, so it wasn't from nothing, but there was never any extra money. And my father was the first one to go to college in his family, and his father went to work after the 2nd grade, and my mother's father went to work after the 8th grade. So I make sure those children of mine who are so fortunate recognize that that's not a long ways away. That's just, they were my grandparents, but we all share this. I mean, Larry has the same stories.
Well, in our family, those are called the daddy walked 20 miles to school in the snow stories.
Yes, that's what they call you. Sarcastically, or they? Or,
sarcastically.
Yeah. My kids, although as they get older, mine are now in their mid to late 20s, they do start to appreciate, look, this is it. Let's shift to macro. You've got so much to add here as well. So we'll do macro finance. There's all sorts of change in the world, and you were advising on a lot of it at Evercore. But there's BlackRock. They bought HPS and the infrastructure business because of the growth of alternatives. What do you see in the current world in terms of change, and where is it headed going forward? And obviously, alternatives and private markets are a big part of that.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm a rarity, I guess. I'm 74 years old, and I'm 100% invested in equities. I just believe that over the intermediate to long term, that's where you're going to get your returns. And I also believe that if, for a significant portion of your portfolio, the best risk to take is a liquidity risk. You obviously can't take that with all of your assets because you need to live, you need cash flow. But I do believe that private equity, even with the fees, will generally outperform over any reasonable period of time public equities. I believe that for 2 reasons. I think, and you have a private equity owner today.
They've been a good owner too.
I think they really back strong managements, but if there's a core shift that's required in either the strategy or the leadership, they do it. Public boards are incredibly more patient with those sorts of things. And then the second thing is a fundamental change in the financial markets, which occurred before the financial crisis. The whole advent of covenant-light debt structures. In the old days, if a business violated its covenants, the equity got wiped out. In the covenant-light world, it can limp along for 10, 12, years. I mean, we at Evercore have a restructuring business.
A really good one. The leader of it,
right? Great restructuring business. So we, TXU, which was a buyout of KKR and Texas Pacific TPG, the equity was worthless in 2009. The restructuring finished in 2018. Rheology was literally worthless in 2009 and 2010. By 2013, Apollo had more than doubled their money.
Yeah.
And those businesses would have been owned by the creditors in the old world. And so if you think about leveraged private equity as an option, and an option is obviously valued based on its strike price, how far in or out of the money it is, and how long does it last. The covenant light has basically extended by years the length of the option. So I think that actually helps private equity versus public stocks.
100%. And then you have the growth of private credit, which I was talking to somebody recently, grew out of the credit crisis. The banks pulled back in 2009. There's all sorts of new regulation. And then private credit goes from, a small business that frankly, even those of us in it, I wasn't really aware of it.
$2 trillion.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, the growth.
It's unbelievable. And it's interesting. Some people who care about public policy and systemic risk initially get alarmed by that there's $2 trillion of risk credit.
No, not really regulated, feds,
et cetera, et cetera. But the reality is there's very little leverage in that world. Maybe people back lever it 1-to-1 or something like that. And so you compare, financial institutions and, fail because of liquidity, as you know better than anybody, rather than because of a lack of capital. And so what the private credit has done has distributed risk broadly throughout the system and largely in the hands of long-term investors who aren't levered. Now, they could lose a fair amount of money, but they're not going to be a systemic risk.
No, insurance companies, long-term investors there. And now our clients are in a lot of these alternative, our high net worth clients can bear that liquidity, that illiquidity, because they've got, significant wealth and they can have the wealth available as they need it.
Yeah, and what you're basically, I think, saying, which I passionately believe in, that the safest way to get excess return is to sacrifice a little bit of liquidity, and that's what the private market
100%. It's just a great way of putting it. Let's you talked about being invested in equities, perspectives on the U.S. market today, and also on a macro basis. There's a lot going on, but this also gets us into AI, which you can't really talk about markets today in the U.S. economy without AI. So, any thoughts on all of that?
Well, I'm a big believer in the relative performance of the U.S. economy. I think we have so many things going for us. In the entire capital markets, venture capital ecosystem, the innovation that we have here, the rule of law, largely, and all of those things. If you look at I think we have 25% of GDP, and we're like 63% of global market cap.
So
now, normally you would say, wow, that must be way overvalued. And that, there's probably some element of that, but I don't think that discontinues the performance of the American markets. I do think there's a big, long-term cloud on the horizon. I think our fiscal situation
that's the one thing I talk about. Yeah,
is totally unsustainable, and over the long run, I always say, it's going to end. When it ends, it's going to end really ugly. I just don't know what's going to precipitate that and when it will happen.
I don't disagree with any of that. I talk constantly about just the unsustainable level, and it really is spending. I've done the analysis. This is non-political. GDP, taxes, tax collection as a percentage of GDP from 1945 to 2024 was about 17%, and spending was about 19%. But from 19 to 24, tax collections were about 17% of GDP, and spending's 27%. Both Republicans and Democrats, spending more than we collect. So I agree. It's a big problem. I do come back though to what you said. The economy is just such a engine of innovation and growth. And we have a lot of clients that make their wealth through building businesses, so we track this closely. There are 4 to 5 million new startups every year. There are 33 million businesses employing fewer than 500 people, 60 million Americans working in those small businesses.
Yeah.
Nobody else in the world is anywhere close to that.
Yeah. So, if AI, I think its effect on every corner of our economy is going to be profound. I think the effect on the economy will be parabolic, not linear. It's going to take a while for it to affect productivity, employment, and production. But once it's fully adopted, it's going to be incredibly powerful. To me, the biggest obstacle to more rapid effect is old farts like us, who just aren't as technologically comfortable as the next generation and generation.
But what you would do, what I'm trying to do here is lever the people who are and use the bully pulpit, talk about we've got to work this into every nook and corner of Rockefeller or Evercore, and then unleash the people who really will be able to do that. We're working hard on that here. We call them AI enablers, and then we're trying to find points of light in the business. And you'd be doing the same thing if you were still CEO of Evercore. And our peers across, this is the thing about American business too, CEOs across the country and every kind of business are going to do that, which is why American companies, I think, will be early adopters relative to everybody else.
I agree with that. And, it's at one of our Warburg offsites, we had the chief economist from OpenAI. And by the way, he's a terrific speaker. I would recommend.
That's a great idea. And he does that? Huh?
He's really good. And he said a couple things that really stuck with me. One was that the rate of innovation in artificial intelligence is 2 to 3 times the rate of innovation, in Moore's law, embedded in Moore's law. And so in his view, its capacity and ability is growing so much faster than the development of chips. Second thing he said, which I don't believe will happen, not because it won't be possible, but because it'll be not great marketing. He was asked, tell me something that will shock us 5 years from now. And he said, there'll be a company with $1 billion of revenue and 1 employee.
Wow.
And afterward I said to him, that'll never happen, because in order to get to $1 billion of revenue, people are going to say, let me see your team. So there've got to be at least 2 or 3 people there.
Let's shift gears because I want to get into the public policy realm where both you and Jane, your wife, have been actively involved. You served in the Carter administration, and that was early in your career. How did that help shape and form Ralph Schlosstein, in every way, including to become the exceptional leader you have been and everything you've done since that time?
Well, first of all, and this is a commercial for public service. I've had a thoroughly enjoyable and incredibly satisfying 45 years in finance. In the 7 years I worked in Washington, I woke up every morning, rightly or wrongly, feeling that I was doing good for the country. And that's a great feeling. Anybody who's out there and is thinking about having a career where you do both, I strongly encourage that. Having said that, to me, public service today is a little less appealing, because the thing that I loved about public service was the government. And to me, politics was a spectator sport, which was part of it. And when I worked in the Hill and in the White House, there was always a solid core of Democrats and Republicans who would do the right thing for the country. I'll never forget when I worked on the Joint Economic Committee, Hubert Humphrey was the chairman, very partisan Democrat. This was in the middle of the New York City fiscal crisis.
This is like 74,
75.
75.
Yeah. And Bill Simon, who Humphrey, by the way, despised, who was Secretary of the Treasury, was testifying before the committee.
Republican, because it was Ford. Ford was the president. Yeah.
Ford was president. And so the staff get together to brief Humphrey ahead of time, and I was sort of the expert on state and local government financial issues in New York City. I said, this is a national issue. I think you should make this a subject of the hearing. So he said, great idea. Write an opening statement for me and a bunch of questions. So this is like 5, 6 in the afternoon. I stayed up till 2 or 3 in the morning doing this, wrote a really good opening statement, a bunch of questions. And then the hearing comes, Simon shows up, shakes hands with Humphrey, sits down, and I put my opening statement in front of him. He kind of pushes it aside and goes off on the macro economy. And then I'm shoving my questions in front of him. He's ignoring them. So at the end of the hearing, I say, Senator, what happened? He says, well, Secretary Simon called me at 10 last night, and he said the New York City discussions are at a sensitive point, and he'd appreciate it if I stayed away from that in the hearing.
What is the role for business leaders today in commenting on, national issues and things that are outside the province of the company that you're governing? Has that changed from, earlier in your career, or even your time at Evercore? What do you think about that today?
Well, I think we're in a challenging time right now, in the sense that, we happen to have a leadership of the country right now that has a perspective that if you're kind of with me or you're not.
Yeah.
And I think that, it presents challenges for every single business leader in this country. And if you're running a business, you have a fiduciary responsibility to your shareholders, and you've got to think through very carefully what you do individually. I think the places where this would have to come are places like the Business Roundtable, the Chamber of Commerce, and if there's something that collectively they can all bond together and say this is not acceptable, that's, to me, the most likely way that business will, challenge things that they might otherwise find private.
Because the reason I asked it, and you threaded it well. It's a difficult topic, but there still is a role for shaping policy for business leaders, and they need to be, they need to be a part of that.
Yeah, and I think the perception is that businesses are, and the CEOs of businesses are, predominantly, if not exclusively, about their firm's self-interest. I actually don't think that's true.
Nor do I.
I think the vast majority of business people care deeply about America, about the country, about the laws and ethics. But if it's hard to speak up about that, and there's a risk that creates problems for your business, it does create a chilling effect on that.
Let's move on to kind of the legacy and some of the things that you've seen and done over the course of your career. You've seen so many different and worked alongside so many different leaders, and you are one of those leaders. What's the best leadership advice you've received? And maybe at the end of that, we can go back and say, what's the best leadership advice you've ever given? But what about receive first?
Well, I don't know about leadership advice, probably so. The interesting thing is, I always say the single best piece of advice that I ever received in my entire career was on the first day of my very first job.
Mm.
And this fellow, John Stark, who was the staff director.
This is 50-something years ago.
Yeah, this was in 1975.
Wow.
No, 74, sorry.
Yeah.
And he sat down. I was, 23 years old, right out of graduate school. And he had this talk that he gave to kids who were joining the staff. And it was basically about, and this was what I was talking about earlier, how you can disagree with people's ideas, but always treat them respectfully, never question people's motives. He said, if you remember one sentence from this discussion, which was about a half an hour long, remember this: the people that you kick on the way up the ladder will be there to step on you on your way down. And the basic gist was obviously always treat people respectfully the way you'd like to treat them. And I've tried to do that. And, going back to those 65 partners that I asked to leave, I never said, this isn't working, give me your badge, and take your personal things out of the office. I always said, you and I made a mistake together. This is not the right place for you. You're working on two things or one thing. Finish that up at 100%. Spend 100% of the rest of your time looking for a job. Let's agree on what we're going to say to the external world. I'll validate whatever you want to say, as long as it's, got, relationship to the truth. And I'll carry you for up to 6 to 12 months because it's easier to find a job from a job. And so of those 65 people, there's a good number that I still, will have breakfast or lunch with, and they're all doing fine. They just, weren't able to produce at the level that we require at Evercore.
It's unbelievable, Ralph, how much. This is one reason why we've been friends for literally decades. Both of the things that you said, I actually, I sometimes teach a class at Yale Law School, as you know, and I want you to come up there and talk to the students. They're great students, and I was up there last night, and I'll bring in guest speakers, but yesterday afternoon was my session. But I ended up with my top 10 list of career advice that I give to young people. And some of them are, a little bit, they're already maybe, late 20s and early 30s in the room. But one of the things I said is treat everybody well. And I said, what you just said, over time, the way you treat people becomes who you are. Like, it might be a transaction early on in your career, but if, the people that are doing the jobs that make a place like this work, do them, and they might be the more difficult jobs that, frankly, many of my relatives and ancestors have had for years. Make sure you're thanking them for those jobs regularly. That's who you become. And if you don't, then you become the person who doesn't do that. That's where you started, which is treat everybody well, as a piece of advice.
When I had decided that, I wanted to do something else in March of 2007, I had a conversation with Larry, and I said, look, a year from now, I want to be doing something else. I have no idea what it is.
20 intense years there.
Yeah, 20 years. And I said that, and I always joke, we went through a month of denial where we were in 2 or 3 meetings a day.
Yeah.
And he never acknowledged that I had that conversation. Then we went through 2 months of divorce. And then everything's been great since then. But, in that period of time, we did our first upward reviews. And so Larry came to me and said, I know you've said you're going to leave, but if we don't do an upward review of you, it'll be a tip-off to the firm that and we haven't announced that, and we're not going to announce it for a few more months. So we're going to you're going to be included. I said, fine, I don't care. So my upward review, the first comment was, and I love this, by the way, Ralph is the most demanding person I've ever worked with in my life. But every time he's had something critical to say to me, he's done it in the privacy of his office or my office. And I've walked out feeling better about him and myself.
That is a really great compliment.
Yeah, so I thought that was pretty cool.
Hard to do it. When you were saying that, I've sometimes said, even to my family, over the years, there have to be many conversations if you're in leadership where you do what you said, which is, look, this is not working. And I often describe exactly what you did, where many of the people that I have let go and jobs that I've been in over the years are friends of mine today, because I've had the exact same conversation. Look, this is just not working, and this is going to be a hard transition, but we're going to get you in a better spot. I'm going to be an advocate for that, and then you're going to look back on this and realize it was the right move. And the other thing, when you talk about doing it from the privacy of your office, Derek Jeter's on our board, and he's a big part of our firm, and he has said that when he was captain of the Yankees, one of the things people would prod him to do was vocally and visibly, be the captain with every player, and you're not doing that right. And he said, you had to treat every single player differently because of who they were. And there were many that you had to be speaking to in the privacy of the clubhouse because they weren't going to react to something visible in front of, 50 million Americans watching the game. So it's just, you either treat the individuals in the way you want to be treated in their position. You hear a lot of leaders say this. I know you've done it, and I think I've done it, and it's not the norm, and it does set you off.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Doris Kearns wrote a biography of Lyndon Johnson.
The Lincoln one is what I thought you were going to say.
No,
It was so good.
yeah.
I read the Johnson
But
one. I read that.
she got, unlike Robert Caro, who wrote 3 volumes of biography about Johnson, she actually had an opportunity to interview him. And at one point in the book, she says, Mr. President, how was it that you were able to get senators from states to vote for things that was clearly unpopular in their state? And he looked at her and he said, young woman, the thing you have to recognize is that every senator is motivated by some combination of love and fear. And I know the right combination for every single one of them.
That's a great story.
Jeter's comment.
Yes, exactly right. Let's wrap up. But what I want to wrap up on is it's been a storied career, 5 decades, incredible success. You also have a great family, and you've been quite successful there, a great marriage. What are the things, and you don't have to limit it to one, the things of which you're most proud at this point in your life?
Well, I have always said I'm a very simple person. If my family loves me, if I have a great relationship with my friends, which I'm fortunate to have a few of, if I have my reputation and my health, I'm a happy guy. You can take a whole lot of other stuff away, including a lot of financial stuff. The good news is the first 3, your relationship with your family, your friends, and your reputation, you control 100%. The 4th you can only influence by taking care of yourself. And, when you get to be my age, 74, last night I went to a memorial service, and you think a little bit about, okay, what will mine be like? And I thought what I want to have is that phrase, up in lights or whatever, and just say, I did my very best to live life that way. And obviously at the very end, I failed on number 4, the health.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's it's going to be the very end. You still got a long ways to go here, but I want to thank you for being here today. It's been an incredible career, an incredible life, and it's ongoing. You're providing advice to different high-quality firms today, but the public service, the BlackRock story, which is one of the stories of our generation, and then the Evercore magic, which is literally what you put in place there. If I was in the audience, and I like to think I'm not one of these skeptical investment bankers, not saying I'm better or worse than them, I'm just more willing to hear the half full glass than many investment bankers. And I heard you in that room that time, I would have thought, boy, that's pretty aggressive.
Yeah.
And you did it and beat it. So bravo on an incredible career. You're a great friend. I appreciate you being here today, and our clients are very fortunate to have had you.
I know it's off limits to say something after your conclusion.
No, it's not. Not
but,
for you.
We're both incredibly fortunate in that we're 2 of, I don't know who else you could say this about, who've succeeded and had a meaningful leadership role in 2 different industries in financial services. And, what you've done at Rockefeller is amazing. I think people realize it from externally, and obviously you had a tremendously successful career in large cap investment banking. So maybe next time I'll interview you.
Ralph, thank you for sharing your journey from public service to building 2 of the most influential firms in finance. Your perspective on leadership, innovation, and long-term thinking is both timely and timeless. We're grateful to have had you as part of the Rockefeller community and for the thoughts you share with us today. Many thanks. All the best.